And today, my hopes was to, I mean, which a lot of you probably already do know this, but how much it takes for an HR human resource to get from point A to point B and whom all needs to be involved. So that's kind of what my presentation is today. Here's my clicker. Okay, government HR chain. So we have our federal government, which also, as we know, is our FLSA, FMLA, the ADA, OSHA, Affordable Care Act, articles and publications. And those are the main ranking ones. Those are the ones we get nailed for the big bucks. Indiana state employment laws, those are your IC codes that you'll find. And local government ordinances, your personnel policies, your SOPs, the standard operation procedures, and also salaries and benefits. Local HR government, and who do we answer to? How many HR people do we actually have in here, or payroll HR people? So as you know, it's kind of hard because you don't quite know who all to answer to, and where does that start? At the top, I listed the county commissioners and the county council. County commissioners, they're over your personnel policies and your benefits. They vote those in, they make those ordinances, they make your plan documents for your health insurance benefits. County council does the salary ordinances and the pay grades. They hold our purse strings. That's just about how it has to be. And then our auditor, which is your gatekeeper. She takes care of your claims and everything that comes down the path from your council and your commissioners. She's actually the secretary to both. And then your department heads and your elected officials. They have to implement the policies, monitor the benefits, and make daily work happen. And I feel we all were taught in school all about our resources, coal, electricity, all those sorts of things. But we forget that human resources is exactly what it is. Our employees are our resource. And part of making sure that we provide them with a safe place to work and an enjoyable place to work is HR's job. Let's see if it'll click again. All right, personnel policies, manuals, and SOPs, plans. We started ours 2 years ago? 2 years ago. We still have 2 more to go, 2 more SOPs to get finished. But the one thing, it's very important to know that when starting a personnel policy and a procedure, manuals that you need to remember the dynamics of your county, because it needs to be tailored to what you do. And not every county is the same. You'll have departments and things that won't be the same as Brown County, but it's important for you to make sure that in your county that you are having more than one person on your SWAT team. Do a SWOT analysis. So that's your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. Know those. Know how they come into your world. And these policies and procedures are to create, fix, and enforce employment practices that are legal and ethical, which that's where we get into exempt, non-exempt, how many holiday pays, do they work their lunch, do they get paid, all of the things that comes down the HR line when you have all those questions, when the department heads have questions, when the commissioners have questions. If it is detailed, right now, currently, this is our personnel manual. It is 106 pages.
We have 150 employees.
Yeah, it's almost a page per employee. It is an asset to have it in writing. I don't know how much more that I can explain on that, other than the fact that it's priceless. When there's something that someone has a question to, and to know that that's always going to change too. With new laws, they change often. This provides your human resource employees a guide to their rights and safe and a reasonable working environment. because you're going to work on your strengths, your weaknesses, the opportunities, and threats. And that is what makes your SWAT team. HR's most valuable assets. And when you work in county government, there is a chain of command that goes from, as we just showed, from the top to the bottom. But at this point, I would kind of like to introduce my team that's behind me. I have Commissioner Biddle, Diana Biddle. I also have Julia Reeves. Commissioner Pittman. That's right. He's here with me this morning. He's my HR guy. Don't want to leave him out. We have Julia Reeves. She's our new auditor, which we welcome her. And we have Judy Swift-Paldrell, which is our recorder. And then we have Glenda Stogsdell Johnson. And she is our county councilman. And then we have Chris Ritzman, and she is our planning and zoning director. And then we have Mark Ennis, which he is in black because he is my man in black. He rescues me often. He's with Bliss McKnight. And then Mike Magner, and he is our highway director. And as we all know, when we talk about the different assets, your department heads, your elected officials, your employees, records, always keeping a record. Your PERF personnel. I don't know about you, but I spend a lot of time on the phone talking to my PERF people. Do not be afraid to pick up the phone and say, I've got this going on. Actually, I just had a gentleman that had retired this year. He had been in PERF before for 7 years, and he needed 3. But he had been with PERF 3 years prior, and when he left, he took his annuity with him. And so he thought he wouldn't have a retirement because he didn't have his 10 years in. When we found out that even though you take your annuity upon separation, the pension still stays. So we had to prove that he still had been there and how many years, and I sent all of that information in over a week ago, and he also retired with a PERF retirement. So you have to remember to call your PERF, talk with your PERF. I try to have a PERF representative in the county at least once a year for people to sit down and talk to. State Board of Accounts, they are not your enemy. As we all think a lot of times, State Board of Accounts is coming, the red flags fly up. But you have questions on how things need to be, do not be afraid to call them. Send them an email. I like emails because then I print it off and I say, well, this is what you said. So it's always nice to be able to go to State Board of Accounts. U.S. Department of Labor. I spent many hours. I imagine that a lot of you remember the nightmare of exempt and non-exempt and how high we were going to go with the salaries and what was ended up going to be with that. We actually changed our personnel policy twice because of that. And it's still out there. They haven't settled it yet, but it'll be soon, I'm sure. And then your SWAT team, your own home team. That means a lot. And using your home team when you get started on these different projects, listening to everyone. We had many of hours of talks over a 12-hour workday or a 6-hour personal, to some of us who have 8-hour work days and 4-hour personals. And why would one get 6 and the other one get 4 for their credit hours in their half-day shifts? It's that different all over the whole entire county, so that's where that comes into play. HR consultants, I have Lori behind me, and Lori Celine, she is from Wagner, Irwin and Shealy and Associates, and my broker. And the reason why I put that up there is I have Larry Mayfield from Zeller Insurance out of Columbus, and I'm not not advertising for him, but if you have a broker, your broker should be working for you. You need to make sure that when you go to bid for something or anything like that, you don't have to bid out brokers. You can make your broker do the job. Have him bring those people to you instead of you going out searching for those people. Larry has risk management. He's brought Bliss McKnight into us and what we can do through our county. He'll send me all kinds. I got HR 360, and it's in there. You'll see it at the end in my references. It is a gift. If there's anything that changes, it comes up on my internet, which there are other things. Bliss McKnight actually has a format that also does that too for you also.
What is a broker?
An insurance broker.
Insurance, okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. So like there's quite a few. There's quite a few that actually comes to the conferences that set up. But make sure they're working for you. I mean, they need to do their job. And if they really are hands-on, coming to see you, talking about your open enrollments, talking about everything that's coming down the line as far as county government is concerned, they need to know that business. Sure.
So, any county commissioners in here? Good. So, I really don't want to mess up their world, but I'm going to. From a county commissioner's standpoint, I'm in my second term now, and when I started this 4.5 years ago, our personnel policy was what, Melissa, 12 pages?
Yeah, and it's from 1990.
It was from 1995. It hadn't been touched. We amend and upgrade our personnel policy every year. So beginning of the year, we go through if we need to make some amendments, some changes. It is a living document. So your personnel policy, if you have an employee issue, should be addressed in that policy. And that policy is what your employment attorneys, who generally, like if you have Bliss McKnight, which a lot of us do because they're a preferred vendor for AIC, correct? I think so. But if you have Bliss McKnight, you probably also have Governmental Insurance Exchange, which is your attorneys. So any tort claims that come to your county, you print them off, you send them to your insurance broker, or Larry Mayfield, whoever yours might be, and then they send them over to Bliss McKnight, who sends them to GIE. We never see those tort claims again. Our county attorneys do not deal with tort claims. They go all through our insurance company. When we did our bids and when we went through this process of redoing our personnel policy, Jerry came on 2 years ago, and Jerry insisted, by God, we are going to rebid our insurance. And I just hated him for it. Because it's a big undertaking. I mean, just the RFP alone is about that thick for your insurance when you want to go out and tell your insurance companies what they're bidding on. Jerry learned it's not about finding a new broker. It's about finding a broker who has your back, who bends over backwards for you, and when you call them and say, hey, two of our sheriff's cars were involved in an accident, and I don't know the details yet, but we've got 2 down sheriff's cars, and we got 2 sheriffs going to the hospital. We called our broker. Our insurance adjuster for those vehicles was in our sheriff's department's parking lot before the cars got back. And they were there to do the adjustments and to get the paperwork done. So our broker works for us like crazy. We actually went through the bidding process, had a company come in as a new broker and underbid us by about, $30,000 on our workman's comp. But we went through the workman's comp and figured out they were kind of doing a bait and switch to get the business. The county commissioners voted to take the higher bid in order to keep Bliss McKnight, GIE, and the insurances that we had because we are so well covered. I convinced him. So it's not about the broker coming in. If you've got an independent broker can bring you your insurances. So, and you want to know how this relates to HR. If your insurance is written right, the Bliss McKnight guys are the ones, your personnel policy, they're the ones that are going to defend that in court. They want it right. So check with your P&C carriers, because a lot of them have deals with the HR people where they will provide you and pay for certain parts of your personnel policy. Property and casualty, P&C. Sorry, I used to sell insurance too. So it's really important to get your commissioners on board. A lot of these companies, personnel policies, insurance companies, they rely on the fact that as a public official, you are not well educated in the details. And they can kind of slide things by you that, you know, you might not catch. Nothing gets by me. So I try not to. But I just want to say how important your actual document is for your personnel policy, because if you have an employment wrongful termination based on personal conduct in the office, if that conduct is not spelled out in this document, your attorneys for your employment law are not going to be able to defend you well in court. So if this document is very well detailed, then your attorneys are going to love you, because then this is the document they have to defend. So that's why it's so important, especially today when employee litigation and employee terminations, wrongful terminations, you know, you can say one thing wrong in your office and you've completely destroyed, you know, any reputation or loyalty you thought you had by just one comment. And we see it today in the Facebook society we live in. So don't let that come back to bite you. That's why your personnel policy is so critical, because this is the document that your attorneys have to defend in court. If you terminate someone for something that you think is right, but it's not spelled out in here, it's going to come back and bite you. Just saying. All right.
For a minute. Okay, and then your employment attorneys, which Diana was just speaking of that, risk management trainers. I learned that one the hard way. Council bought two $15,000 mowers for Parks and Rec and a $50,000 Kubota. Well, it was no big deal. We had an older gentleman out there that was doing the management, doing a terrific job. No, I didn't even worry about any trainings. The next summer, they hired in some 18, 19-year-olds that have a lead foot. One of them drove one up a tree. One of them was using the bucket to actually plant post. Everything started getting torn up along with themselves. Lots of work with comp claims. So instead of having someone come in when they first got hired and doing all the training, I had to call Mark afterwards and say, can you get down here? And so we also found out they weren't using proper safety equipment. And so risk management needs to be more proactive instead of active. But if something does happen, you need to be active. HR trainings, as you guys all know, if you have anyone that works in your HR departments, those can come from a number of different places. HR online services, there's certifications at Ivy Text, and there's a SHRM certification, which I'm currently working on. If any of you do or are employed as an HR, I suggest that you might want to look at the SHRM certification. You can buy it. It's about $800. It gives you 18 months. Then they have a study on your computer, on your iPad, on your phone, and you have 18 months to read all the books and study up, take plenty of practice tests before you go for your certification. But I'm learning more and more every day. And the Indiana City HR professionals, which you will see on the back page down here in the blue, in the center, there's actually 32 members of us right now. I don't know, is anyone else in here other than myself on that email chain? There, back there. So what happens a lot of times is, hey, does anybody have a sheriff's policy? What are you doing for your winter policy? What are we doing for weather policies? We share. We show each other what we have. We explain what's going on, trying not to reinvent the wheel, but also trying to stay legal. It cuts down on the cost to the counties from us running to an attorney every time we turn around to try to make sure that we've got it correct. It is a wonderful chain that we have going on. So if you would like, you should check in and get with, it is Dottie. Is it Dottie Miller? And she is from DeKalb County. So she started this, just a little bit, like 5 of us. I met them actually in Terre Haute, or not Terre Haute, Fort Wayne. And I gave them my information. I got caught up in it, and then it's just went from there on. But it's a great resource. Personnel policies and procedure manuals. Your standard operating procedures. Where you would want those more so than anywhere else is like my highway department. Mike has he has a different walk than the rest of us. He has to be at work for 10 hours a day, 4 days a week. 7 days a week, that's right. And the guys are there. They have a whole different kind of world that they live in compared to us who work in offices. So having a different policy procedures. Now, of course, your main things like your FMLA, your FLSA, your LSA, all of your ADA, everything, all of that is standard. That goes across the board to everyone. Equal rights among all employees, no matter where they work. But to have, you might have more than one policy.
To make it easier for us, if there's minimal changes between your highway department and your standard policy, we may recommend to you condense those and just do carve-outs. One of the counties had 7 different policies that they were asking us to combine into one. The fewer the documents, the easier to reach it, the quicker to find it. That's our recommendation.
Okay. And then job descriptions, classification, and salary ordinances. And I have our ordinance in red with questions because the other policies that we have had were not voted on by our county commissioners. Actually, you can have all kinds of policies. You can talk to your blue in the face. You can talk about it in a meeting. You can say everyone agrees to it. But if you don't put an ordinance number on that and vote it in legally, it is not anything that is a legal binding. It's not enforceable, correct. Personnel policies and procedures and SOP manuals, again, ordinances, question mark, and ever-changing document. Our last one was just done in November. Was it November? November, because we had to add the whistleblower because it changed. And at this point, I would like to let Lori take over.
Really?
Yeah, really.
All right. Good morning. It is so nice to have faces with all your voices, except so on the count of 3, everyone tell me who you are so I then have a name with a face, because I'm sure several of you I've spoken to either on the phone or by email. As Melissa said, I'm Lori Seelan with Wagner, Irwin, and Shealy. Not Kent, the all-knowing and almighty and experienced, but any of you who know him well knows that in less than 24 hours, he's headed to Mexico. So I was lucky enough to have Melissa invite me to come with you today instead of going to Mexico with Kent. I'm going to start by saying, 1, 2, 3. I knew it. Okay. Let me start by saying I am not here to drum up business for Wagner, Irwin, and Shealy. Trust me, between Mark sending me stuff and Melissa calling me and some of you others, not saying names, I got plenty of work to do. But there are some things that we really need to stress to make sure you're on top of the game. And Melissa invited me today, can you PowerPoint me please? To talk to you specifically about job descriptions. I don't know how to use that. Okay, there you go. So I thought we'd lead in with just a little humor. How many of you have a highway department that might do something like this that says, well, if it's not in my job description, I don't have to do it? Anyone? Well,
That's a state highway.
That's a state highway, of course it is. Of course it is. Anyone with any comments, questions, please just shout it out. I'm more than willing to stop and pause. But yeah, we've heard things like, that's not in my job description, or we don't have job descriptions, or we don't need job descriptions. We were talking at dinner last night about people that say, everyone's cross-trained to do everyone else's job in the office, so we don't need to write it down. Well, what about when there's an FMLA case? What about when there's ADA? What about if you're wondering if you're exempt or non-exempt? Huge classification problems. So it is important to document exactly what your duties are. And it's more important to know what are your duties now. Not a job description that was written in 1999. My friend Shirley here. She sends me job descriptions from 1999 and says, can you update these? Yeah, number one, we're going to remove the word typewriter. Carbon paper, yes. Some of these computer software programs that are no longer used, we need to get those out of there. So, yeah, go. Oh, so what is the job description? Why is it important? What's in it? My little red hens, who's going to prepare it? And who's going to adopt it? And let me grab my notes. My notes. Thank you. So the important thing to remember is the job description is about the position, not the person. What does the payroll clerk in the auditor's office do? Not what does Ruth, who's been here for 27 years, do. So when I come into your county and I talk to you about writing job descriptions and filling out job descriptions, I say to you, position, not the person. Keep in the back of your mind, if Ruth were to retire tomorrow, what's the next person going to do? What's the requirements they're going to have? Well, Ruth has a master's degree, and she's been an accountant for 40 years, so the next person to come in has to have that also. Well, I'm going to question that. Are you going to step someone into exactly where Ruth was, or are they going to build up to that? You went way too far.
I know.
What the heck?
Back at job classification, right? There it is.
Okay, we can go there.
Okay. That's where you.
No, I was there, but you're all right. I was with my little red hen.
You want to go back?
No, I don't care.
We can go back.
I don't care. I don't like PowerPoints. These are the kind of phone calls I get with Melissa. So usually they start with, you're not going to believe, or, are we the only county? How many of you have said that to me? Are we the only county? No. I promise you, if it's happening in your county, it's happening somewhere else. For example, emergency closing. How many of you guys closed courthouses and county facilities last week? How many of you had questions saying, do our employees get paid? Yeah, many phone calls came in. And I think Tim's going to talk about that a little later. But my first response to you is always, what does your policy say? Which takes you back to what they've already talked about. A good written policy will tell you step one of your pay policy for emergency closings. All right, that was off the topic. All right. So a job description. We're in this handout. The handout that says not in my job description. It's got the beautiful state highway picture on the front of it. Step one is the job categories. We can go back to that. Anyone have questions on which job category goes into which type of position? Any questions on those? Can I skip it? Do I need to pause on it? FES job categories. First page of your handout, hopefully. Who knows whether or not they're a PAT, a COMET, LTC? Blank faces. Anyway, somebody. Shirley. I know. Fountain County knows. Rush County definitely knows. A lot of people get upset saying, I shouldn't be a comet because I do more than clerical work. You're right. A comet is computers, office machine operation, technician. You're not just support staff if you're a comet. You're not just a department head if you're a PAT. Okay? Not just highway guys or LTCs. So this one gives you a brief outline of what they are. Job descriptions are not written for elected officials. Do you know why? Anyone else? I hear whispering. Oh, right, because it doesn't matter, because whatever we tell you. Because you don't pick what you do. You are told by the overpowering Indiana Code, State Board of Accounts, that sets up what your duties are. As the auditor, you have a whole book of timelines and what's due when. So for me to put it in a job description for you, 60-some pages probably, because your duties are never ending, along with a lot of the elected officials. Commissioners too. So your second page, I guess it's marked page 3 on the handout, jobs within your FES job categories. If there's any questions on to those, these are just general specifics for your county. You may have a paralegal who's a PAT instead of a comet. This is not gospel. Job descriptions and classifications are based on the specific duties and recommendations from us and talking to you about it. So don't assume just because you see office manager under the comet, you're a comet. You may be a PAT. Okay. All right. Switch. Back. Right-handed. No, right-handed. All right, never mind. All right, so a job description is a written statement that talks about the main objective of the job. It talks about its essential and non-essential functions. Talks about your job qualifications. 30 people may hold the same job. Doesn't mean we need 30 job descriptions. One job description per title. Because again, my key stressor is it's the position, not the person. Okay. Job descriptions are brief. You may fill out a questionnaire for me that tells me that you do 87 job duties, and when I'm writing your job description, I have it in one duty statement. I have a lot of employees that say to me, you did not read what I wrote down. You do not have on here every single thing I do. Perfect example, I got a job description questionnaire back. Duty number 1, I unlock the doors. Duty number 2, I turn on the lights. Duty number 3, I start the coffee. Well, guess what? I wrote, performs opening and closing duties. Other duties as assigned, that's my favorite. Answers the phone, yes, because if it's not in my job description, that sucker's going to ring because I'm not touching it. It's not in my job description. I don't want to do customer service. I look at the caller ID and it says Melissa Stinson. I'm like, do not disturb. I am not.
That is not true. This all got started because she sent me an email because she had heard from me.
I was concerned. It was 8 weeks without hearing from Brown County, and I thought, there's got to be something going on in Brown County. Melissa, how are you? Haven't heard from you. Yeah. All right. So, why are job descriptions important? Let's run down those. Number 1, they establish and document the requirements and minimum qualifications. We talked about that. Just because you have a master's degree does not mean your position requires a master's degree. In my opinion, all auditors should be accountants. How many of you are auditors with accounting degrees? Yeah? I think you have one of the hardest, most unappreciated positions in the county. Give yourselves a round of applause. Especially counties who do not have a separate HR department. So then your auditor rolls all the auditor duties and the HR duties. Wonderful quote that I heard last night was, HR is a thing. It should be its own thing. Any of you have full-time HR deputies that spend all day, every day, doing HR stuff? Yeah? It's a full-time job. And even without your team, it can become overpowering. I was a long-haired blonde when I started at Wagner Irwin Shealy just 8 years ago, and I like to say this gray is from my grandchildren. You too, right? That's it. Yeah, see?
She was a brunette when she started.
Okay, job descriptions. Establish, implement, and document standards for training, promotions, and other conditions of employment. How do I go from being a deputy to a lieutenant? Well, it should be in your job description. Look at the differences of being a deputy and then pull the job description of being a lieutenant. There should be some differences in those positions. Number 3, they verify and document compliance with various government regulations. FLSA, FMLA. How many of you have people on FMLA that you give them a copy of their job description and say, take this to the doctor's office with you when you go back? Yeah, absolutely. If your job description is written correctly, there's a section in it that says physical environment, work environment, physical effort. It should have a weight limit lifting in there. It should say whether or not you're bending, you're stooping, you're sitting for long periods of time. All that stuff. Is there water? Yeah. Super, thank you. All that stuff should be written in your job description so the doctor has a clear, it's not just what the employee is saying they are doing. Questions on FMLA and the job description?
Well, I have a question. It's not
Sure.
exactly on that. This SO group, the special
Operating. Yes.
yeah. We have maybe half dozen in our county. And one comment that was made recently, and it was, I think it was to do with maybe our air was out or something. That if you leave, report your time. Well, all except the SOs, they're exempt from keeping time. No, I didn't
No.
think so. And I
The-
said so. I said no one is exempt
Right.
from timekeeping except
Right.
elected officials.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Thank
Yes.
you. We
Yes.
wrote that.
You call your state board of accounts person and you ask them that question and you have them send it to you in an email and then you send that and forward it to all your employees and department heads and that will change the way.
It's called the Indiana Timekeeping Ordinance,
That's
and
right.
it's in IC code.
It's in an IC code.
Okay.
And it would actually be ghost employment if you don't have a time card.
Absolutely, and that's what I said, and their comment back was, well, that's FSLA, and that's all I know.
No, that a lot of people hide under that umbrella. And
Right.
they hide under FMLA umbrella.
Mhm.
Yes. Oh, you're gonna pay me. I have FMLA, so you're gonna pay me. No. FMLA does two things. FMLA gives an opportunity to someone who is ill, taking care of someone who is ill, or someone who is in the military that is on leave. It provides them 12 weeks to be off. It can be a job protection. Unpaid leave, okay? The only thing that county's in the hook for is to make sure that their insurance is kept up and paid. Other than that, it's not an hourly pay. They have to stay home for 2 hours to wait till their kids get on the bus. You don't pay them that 2 hours. If you agree to let them make it up or whatever because their father or mother is overseas, in the military, that is fine. But it's not a paid leave. A lot that gets misunderstood in my world 100 times. They can use their time to pay for it, but the county itself is not on the hook to pay for them.
What's your policy say?
That's right.
You should have an FMLA policy, and a part of that policy should say, as an employee, you are required to use ... of your benefit time to cover FMLA. That is a decision that each county makes for themselves. FMLA simply says you are guaranteed 12 weeks of unpaid. The county then chooses whether or not they're going to have you use some of that benefit time.
That's right. Correct. Is there any questions on any of this? As we're getting down into the nitty-gritties, you guys feel free. That's what we're here for, is to answer questions, tell you our experiences. I don't know everything, but we've been through so much in the last 4 years. Switching me out of the auditor's office and into the commissioner's office has been, wow, what a change. But I'm telling you that doing payroll and HR is insane. It is insane. And we're a small county. I can't imagine if you had a large county and you have someone solely doing both of those. Go back.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Good, good, good. Any other questions while we're paused for a moment? Yeah.
On the FMLA,
Uh-huh.
can you talk about proper tracking of intermittent FMLA?
Intermittent FMLA. You want to do it?
Yeah, I actually have a tracker. And if you give me your email address, I can pretty much email it to anyone that they want. And it actually, you just go in, you put the person's name up at the top, and then you put in their 12 weeks, how many hours. And then as they're gone, intermittently, you just put in and it has as soon as you put in the date, it's going to put in all the 12 weeks, or all of the options of the 12 weeks. And so let's say they're off on Monday, so you put it in there and it automatically deducts how many hours they have left. And then what if they're off half day on Wednesday, and then it deducts that. And so it keeps it running total, and it's marvelous. Actually, I think I got it off of Department of Labor. You may be able to find it, but it's FMLA tracking system. It's an Excel spreadsheet. It is lovely. I send it to all my department heads. Where's Chris? She just walked out. She's using one right now for someone who's on maternity leave. So it's very easy to track. It just subtracts and keeps you a running balance of what day. And the thing of it is, and the one thing you have to remember is when that time card, and I don't know if you do transmittals or how you document, that cannot be documented in any documentation that is open to the public. Okay? FMLA is no one else's business. The department head, whoever handles your FMLA, and whoever actually grants it, which we have commissioners that do that. I know that some people have attorneys that handle their FMLA, but just make sure that that is a HIPAA protected piece of paper, because it's highly protected.
So the brief calculation is 12 weeks of FMLA. You're going to take that 12 weeks, you're going to multiply it by their typical work hours. So if they work 35 hours a week, so 12 times 35, that's the number of hours of FMLA they're guaranteed. And they can take it by the hour. So then you have to track hour for hour. If they come in late, if they leave to go to therapy, that kind of thing. But that's the total number of hours that you should be tracking for them. Okay. Next question.
Okay, so you were talking about having it protected, and I understand that. But using a government email or a county email is typically open to the public or for public review if questioned. So what about
Yeah,
situation?
being in HR, yes. Here.
Our attorney advised us that if you have something like that on your county email, then you write confidential in the header in your regarding confidential, and then so and so's FMLA. Then if someone gave you an open door request and asked for emails that you send out on a certain day, your attorney will look at your emails and he will exempt out those confidential communications. When you communicate with your attorney, the header says, the byline says confidential. So anything I send to my attorney, the first thing on that byline, it says confidential. So those things can be exempted out in an open door public records request.
And if you have a physician or someone that you're dealing with that does not have those clauses on their paperwork, fax. Have them fax it to you. Make sure it's coming into a hopper that you are the only one that gets it, or you're standing there when it comes through, because those actually the doctor's offices will fax quicker than they will email. So, and if you are emailing like the department head their paperwork, there is a confidential verbiage that I was trying to remember where exactly. I think that it's actually on the Department of Labor also. So, yes. Back to you. Standing on it.
Any more? Okay. So I believe we were on number 4 of why our job description is important. They established a standard set of factors for job performance evaluations. Anyone do performance evaluations on a regular basis? Anyone have a county that ties money to the performance evaluations? Occasionally. It's difficult. Side story, we have one county that tied money to a performance evaluation. I'm not going to say good, bad, or otherwise. That's just what they chose to do. Everyone in the county got the full amount except for one lady, and she got higher scores than 50% of the people. So it wasn't just her performance, it was also how well she got along with her department head. So caution on tying money to a performance evaluation, especially when you're tying money to a performance evaluation and giving the department head the choice of how much to give. Okay. Number 5, they provide a basis for communication between managers and employees. You pull someone in your office and you say, you're not living up to your expectations. You're not performing these duties. Well, what are my duties? Well, here they are in a job description. Number 6, they clarify who is responsible for what in the organization. They define relationships between individuals. I had one poor lady, 7 people on 7 different job questionnaires all told me that they supervise her. I looked at her questionnaire. I said, who supervises you? She left it blank. She had no idea who she was reporting to. Your job descriptions are going to develop your rank structure. Which is also number 7. Number 8, they talk about exempt, non-exempt, excluded. Sticky, sticky wicket. There are 3 FLSA tests. You must pass one of the tests to be considered exempt. I can do a real brief. You're paid hourly versus salary. That's one of the qualifications. If you're exempt, you must be paid hourly. That doesn't mean we can't figure out what your hourly rate is, but overall, an exempt employee is paid salary. Okay. Number 2, possibly supervise. If you supervise, you are not automatically exempt. You have to supervise 3 full-time people, minimum. If you supervise 15 seasonal lawnmowers, doesn't make you exempt. You have to have pretty high decision-making. Independent thinking is one of them. There's a whole test, and if anyone's interested in the handout, see me afterwards. I'll give you my business card. Shoot me an email. Say, can you send me that document? FLSA does a wonderful exempt versus non-exempt compliance test. If you want more in-detail information, send me the job description. I can do a brief review for you and tell you what I recommend. Yeah?
So you're saying that they have to meet one of the 3?
There are 3, professional, administrative. No, they only have to meet 1 to be considered exempt. Okay? Yeah, I also have, we in our office have developed a questionnaire that we can send to the employee and say, fill this out, and then their supervisor also fills it out. That gives us even more information about what level, what degree of decision making, what degree of independent judgment do you have before we determine whether you're exempt or non-exempt. Always favor on the side of the employee. Because if you say you are exempt, and then they say, no, I'm not, and they decide to bring up a lawsuit, it's easier to have paid them too much than not enough, because they're going to go back, cause financial liability to the county. Okay. Excluded. First deputies, chief deputies are excluded, which means the FLSA does not even pertain to them. Okay, they are politically appointed positions, politically appointed by the elected official. So your auditors, chief deputy, first deputy, whichever term you use, as the auditor, you appointed that person. Their primary duty is to serve in your absence. If, God forbid, any of you lose your elections and a new auditor comes in, they get to appoint their own first/chief deputy, which is what makes them excluded from FLSA. Okay. Phone call we just got last week, a new clerk, maybe, came in the middle of December and said to the first deputy clerk, by the way, as of January 1st, you don't have a job. What's the problem with that? That clerk had no authority to come in there and say to that person, as of January 1st, you don't have a job. Thanks for the warning, but you're not an elected official until January 1st. So be careful when you start pulling that authority. All right.
I have a question on that. Is there a difference between someone who's coming in and saying, as of January 1st, you don't have a job, versus telling that person ahead of time, my intention is that as of January 1st, you will be replaced, in order to give them advance warning? I know that's a fine line.
That's an extremely fine line, and I would say as an she's asking the difference between coming in as an elected official and saying, I am not choosing to have you be my appointed chief deputy, versus coming in the middle of December and saying, hey, just to give you a heads up, I'm not going to choose you. I'm not going to appoint you to be my chief deputy. I don't have a clear answer for that. That's a really thin line. The biggest, most important thing to remember is your elected official does not have authority until January 1st. So recommendations?
Make sure you fire them on the first.
Right. Well, and to be honest with you, the scenario I'm talking about, they did not. They did not, when they came in on January 1st, they did not say to this first deputy, you're not my first deputy. So this person has been sitting at home using their vacation time, using their personal time, using all their benefit time, just waiting for that phone to ring to say, by the way, you're no longer an employee of the county.
And then, by the way, his anniversary date came in, and he has 3 more weeks that now I have to pay him out because he was not officially fired during that time. So watch it. Make sure that when you have your new people come in, that there is an orientation that takes care of that.
And as a follow-up, that's partly why I asked the question, because of the accrued vacation time or comp time, the payout. If you wait till January 1st, you may have to pay out that person, 3 weeks or so. If you give them the warning on January 1st, you are not going to be here. You're still going to have to pay them out.
Yeah.
They have time to take it in that calendar year if the current person allows it.
Yeah, and it's going to depend, how does your time carry over? When is your time accrue? When are you awarded your time? Some are on anniversary date, some are on January 1st. It's muddy water. Each scenario is different. But yeah.
From an employment law from an employee law point of view, that 3 weeks of vacation that you're going to pay that person out is way cheaper than getting sued over wrongful termination. Yeah. So pay out the vacation.
Yes.
Do you have to have a reason when you go in, or just say, I'm taking my chief deputy with me? I mean, when you go in.
A chief deputy is, yeah, she asked when you go in, and I'm assuming you're talking about as an elected official, and you go in to office and you say, this is the new chief deputy. Now, that's one of your perks as an elected official. You choose who is your chief deputy.
What about the rest of the staff?
The rest of the staff, you better have a good reason to terminate them. You know, we don't just wipe out the office. As an elected official, you are appointing one
And
deputy.
What if the prior office holder did not specify a chief deputy or first deputy?
I have that in one office right now, and my answer to that department head was, she's getting paid first deputy pay. Her salary ordinance says that she is first deputy. Even though you say that she's your employee and you hired her as an employee and took her with you from the auditor to the recorders, it does not matter. She is your first deputy.
And if the pay is the same for both deputies?
Then you will have that position. Okay, what if the pay is the same for all the deputies? That we don't have that where we're from, but I would just think it's time for a job description, and it's time to get it in writing if that's what's going on in your county.
There are counties who do not appoint chief deputies. There are counties, there are elected officials that choose, I am not going to appoint somebody. That's at your discretion. But you are entitled to appoint somebody. And there's Indiana code for that. Yes?
In order to prove political appointment, don't you have to prove it historically? You can't just say, my first deputy is politically appointed, but they were the first deputy with the last 4 auditors.
She's asking for historical proof when you appoint a first deputy? Do you know?
I'm sorry.
Does it have to be proven? Historically, do you have historical proof when you appoint a first deputy?
I was told that it does have to be. In order to say that they are politically appointed, you have to prove that they are that position is indeed politically appointed.
I can tell you the job descriptions that, give me that back. The job descriptions that we prepare, if you are a chief deputy, there is going to be a section on it that says, this is the chief deputy position appointed by the auditor, serves at the pleasure of the auditor, terminated by the auditor at any time. Other counties that we have not written job descriptions for, I don't know what they do. Another good place to your Indiana code tells you which departments, which elected officials are entitled to a chief deputy.
Right, so I am aware of a situation, not necessarily in our county, but an office holder has not designated a first deputy. So in researching what might happen if that office holder became ill, because there is a history of illness, we discovered that if she in fact does not have a designated first deputy and she becomes hospitalized or otherwise incapacitated, the county commissioners get to decide who fills her spot. And that's under, I think, the clerk's statutes. So if you don't have someone designated, or if your first deputy is not eligible to take the office of the person because maybe the first deputy doesn't live in your county, which in some cases that can happen, then it can fall to the county commissioners to fill that slot until the county party can have a caucus to fill the spot themselves. But in some cases, that can take up to 30 days. And if you have formal documents that have to be signed and stamped, that has to go on. That has to continue. So it's very important to check the state statutes of the different elected officials, because some of them are a little different. Clerk and auditor have some different things in them that aren't in the other descriptions. So,
Wrap it up. Okay, wrap it up. Jump down to page 5, my little red hens. Who will prepare your job descriptions? Well, my recommendation is it is a team effort. And if any of you have seen Wagner, Irwin, and Shealy pulling up in Ken Irwin's big black truck and unloading questionnaires, there is a huge process. Johnson County, is Johnson County here? Johnson County can tell you it is a long, drawn-out process. We come in, we talk to all the department heads, we pass out questionnaires, we interview the department heads. The questionnaires are filled out, they come back to us. We write drafts based on the questionnaires. We send those back to the county. The employee checks it, the department head checks it, they send it back to us. Occasionally there's a second draft that goes out. And it comes back again before we can finalize it. It is not a quick write it down, especially if we're going to then tie that to your salary. If Wagner, Irwin, and Shealy comes one step farther and writes your job descriptions and then does something called factoring your job descriptions, where we assign points to different sections of the job description, and then we do an external salary and an internal salary analysis, and we classify your positions, and we make salary recommendations. So we need to make sure that the job descriptions are as accurate can be. No, it's not in there. Never mind. So on page 5, it says who will prepare your job descriptions? Top management can do it. Human resources can do it. But how many of you as top management and human resources have the time, the energy, or know every position in your county to write every job description? Not a hand up. Imagine that. Supervisors, maybe not the highway superintendent, but his supervisor. You have one of them write the job descriptions. Well, again, we want consistency, we want format, we want to make sure everything is in there that we're going to need. So it may not be the best to assign it to a mid-level supervisor. Also, when you get into these supervisors and department heads, that's when a lot of the personal stuff is tied in. I'm going to inflate Steve's job a little bit because I like Steve. Several counties that we do salary analysis, several of the county that we do salary analysis with, a lot of the department's heads say words equals factor points. I get phone calls from counties that say, what do I need to put in that job description to give so-and-so a raise? Well, I don't know so-and-so. I have no problems being the bad guy. Ask Shirley. I've written memos, and department heads are not happy with my recommendation when it comes back. And I say, but compared to what they're doing, compared to what everyone else in the county is doing, compared to what that job is paid externally, this is what we recommend. So that's when the outside consultant comes in. And again, like I said, not here to drum up business. We just signed up county number 76 out of 92 that we have either done work for in the past, because remember Kent's been doing this since he was 10. I like that. He signs my check. I had to think nice things to say. Since about the time I was born, he's been doing this. So from the start of WIS to December, we've been in 76 counties. Those of you we've not been in, I'm coming after you. No. And the employees should be part of the job description writing process. They should not write their own job descriptions. They know what they do better than anyone else, but they don't know what is required of the job. And one of the things we find a lot is your employees seem to know what's happening across the hallway, sometimes better than they know what's happening in their own office. Okay, should your job descriptions be adopted? Absolutely. Job descriptions need to be adopted. Under bottom of page 6, how are job descriptions adopted? You'll notice the first 2 paragraphs are exactly the same, not a typo. They need to be adopted as official documents of the county.
Does that go to the council or does that go to?
If your job descriptions are simply adopted as a job description, there's no salary tied to it, then your commissioners adopt it. Okay? If there are pay grades and factor points and salary analysis, and if your salary ordinance says payroll deputy comment for this salary, then through the salary ordinance, council should also adopt it, the job descriptions. And you want that to be stated in your salary ordinance. Job descriptions attached are also adopted. Yes?
So our last evaluation comment was done in 1999. Do you think it's time for that?
1999. How often should we update job descriptions? Every year. Just pull them out and review them. When's another good time? Budget time. How about another one? Change of work duties. Someone new comes in and they're going to restructure the department. We need to know what the new duties are going to be. When a position becomes vacant, pull the job description out. Am I going to have my new person do what was written on the 1999 job description? Probably not.
Use that typewriter.
Typewriter. I was in a northern county last week, and I met with a judge, and he said, "Can you do me a favor?" I said, "Sure." He said, "On all my job descriptions, can you remove typewriter?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" He says, "I have 3 employees that refuse to use a computer." He said, "I've had to go out and buy 2 refurbished typewriters for these women." He said, "When you write our job descriptions, I want typewriter out of there, and I'm not buying any more typewriters." Okay, welcome to 2019. It's time. No, that's you. Page 7, just real quick, your job descriptions tie into things that are in your personnel policy, FLSA status, recruitment, applicant testing, blah, blah, blah. Last page is an FLSA compliance checklist. I highly recommend pull that out and use it. Make sure you have salary administration policies. Make sure you have job descriptions. Make sure your employees have copies of their job descriptions. Make sure they sign off on their job descriptions. Establish timekeeping, and so on and so on and so forth. I'm going to turn it back to Melissa, but thanks, guys.
All right, thank you. Now we are going to go on to opportunities. Risk management, which I'm going to bring in Mark Ennis from Melissa McKnight. On this, you will see to recognize your weaknesses and realize it's always time to address an issue. Proactive development, comprehensive policies, communicate reporting structures and policies to all employees, offer training to all employees, prohibit all retaliatory behaviors, because believe you me, it can happen. This last year was the first time that I had to actually investigate and conduct a sexual harassment in a hostile work environment. Those are no fun. Know your department heads and elected officials. Elected officials do have legal rights over their own departments, even though you have a policy book. They do have to follow the policies in some ways, but they can alter in others, and it's not illegal. So you need to make sure you know your department heads and what's going on in there that you don't know about. Also, use HR assets to train elected officials the potential employer consequences, and always know threats can and will happen. They will. As much as we try to head things off and do trainings and all of that and have the tapes and have them do online stuff, people are people and things happen. And so when you have completed all you think that you can, there are always threats. Do not ignore them. Action requires reaction. And so here are the steps to remember your strengths, and I will let, in mediation, I will let Mark take over
Okay.
before that.
All right. My name's Mark Innocent. Excuse me, I'm kind of suffering with a bad cold today, so my throat's not doing too well. But anyway, I work with Bliss McKnight, and what we do is we provide risk management services, as they had alluded to several times. And basically what I do is I travel around and work with our county government, city and town government, and what we're trying to do is help you identify potential areas of liability, because as you very well know, there's a lot of liability associated, with employment practices. As a matter of fact, if you have an insurance policy, if you'll look in your general liability insurance policy, you'll have an area typically called employment practices liability, and it specifically covers the types of losses that you would see in this particular area. So the idea is that we want to come in and again help you identify problems which might equate to liability, and that could be, is everybody on board when you terminate somebody? I mean, do you have a legal review when you do that? I'm not going to get into this in depth because my partner in crime in the back, Tim Drury, is going to be presenting here in a little bit, and he's going to talk more specifically about some of these things. But, do we have an updated employee handbook? Do we have, they talked a lot about job descriptions, very important when it comes to legal liability. Do we have a job description because of the Americans with Disabilities Act? When you're interviewing somebody, do they have, what are the essential job functions? Are we going to lay those out on the table? So can you meet the essential job functions? If we don't have a job description, we can't do that. Are your county officials trained if they're doing their own interviews in the proper things they can say in an interview? What can I say, what I can't say? Are they asking the same questions of all the applicants? So just some things like that. But terminations is the biggest area of liability that we deal with. Typically with terminations, and we're not going to get, and maybe Tim will talk about this later, but a lot of our employees are referred to as at will. That in other words, they don't have a property interest in their employment. But we do have some, say for example, your merit sheriff's deputies do have a right to their employment, and they can only be terminated with cause. But nevertheless, there's all the various employment statutes out there, and they can say, well, they were a poor performer, and they weren't doing their job, so we terminated them. But they may come back and say, well, you terminate me because of my age or my disability, or there's various employment laws they can refer to. So that's why one of the things we talk about in risk management too is documentation. It's HIT documentation. We talk about stuff, we always talk about it and talk about it and talk about it because it is very important. If you have a poor performer in, as far as employment is concerned, an official or, an employee, make sure you're documenting that. If they come in late for work, is their performance poor? Document that. Are we counseling that employee? It's not the idea we're always trying to defend lawsuits, but we want to help this employee do better. But if they can't, and we do have to end up terminating them, we want to make sure we do it correctly and have the documentation and make sure that we can prove in court that they did indeed were a poor performer. They talked a little while ago about performance reviews, and if you're doing performance reviews, that's perfectly fine. But are your officials or are your department heads or elected officials, are they sugarcoating those? Oh, they're the best employee we ever had. If we put that in the file, and we have to end up terminating that employee for example, poor job performance. So then the opposing side, when they're in a lawsuit, the plaintiff's attorney pulls that out and says, well, kind of funny that, they've met, they had 5, out of 1 to 10s, 10 being the best, they had 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. So how are you going to defend that? So again, documentation, think about some of the things that we're doing. They referred a lot to like the personnel policies and some of those things. Those are very important, and I can't emphasize that enough, because we do go in to the workplace and see a lot of employee handbooks, and many of them are dated or not up to, don't have current law in them and things like that. And it is an important thing. And I do realize too, in many of the counties we deal with, they don't have a human resource person, and again, it typically falls to the auditor's office, even though that's not a statutory requirement. But the idea is that we have somebody maybe designated to do that, to handle those issues, and work with your county attorney. And by the way, work with your insurance provider. We provide different resources in this particular area, not only training, but employee handbook review and things like that. So we try to help, and I'm not saying there's other carriers out there, and if you have somebody else, work with them. And they mentioned earlier too about your local insurance broker, because most of all our counties, we work through an insurance broker. And so if you have somebody like that locally, there's a good person to tap into and get them to work for you, and get the company, the insurance provider, to work for you. They may have resources that you can tap into. We have a online platform that we provide too, for human resources. So, but we also have a lot of our stuff is very hands-on with our clients. So, we try to do our best to get out there to everybody and try to again help you identify these areas and try to deal with them. So that's the main thing: managing risk. Keeping these these things going into legal or to a lawsuit. That's really what we're after, to try to help alleviate that. Because in the long run, if we can keep these claims under control, we don't have losses where we're having employees suing us, the counties, over wrongful termination or other alleged violations. Then it's really helpful from a premium perspective financially for the county. And you don't want your employees suing you, so. I think that's a real positive thing in the workplace either. But, again, get your insurance carrier involved. We do a lot of like on-site stuff. We actually have employment trainings not only for the employees, but also for just public officials on how to handle these types of situations from a legal liability or risk management perspective. But also the employees, do they understand what's proper conduct in the workplace? Do they understand what we do, like what everybody refers to as, of course, the sexual harassment training, but there's other areas. How about race, religion, national origin, and some of the other protected areas, okay? And so, we try to educate the employees about, what might get them in trouble from a policy perspective in the county, but also from legal liability or civil liability perspective in a lawsuit because, of kind of harassment in the workplace, or actually it's technically discrimination. Harassment is not in the law; it's discrimination. So you don't want to discriminate against somebody, because harassment really equates to discrimination in the workplace, and that's really what it is. So, and of course, that's a big area of liability, and we see a lot of these different types of claims. So it's something that needs to be addressed, in the workplace. So I think that's really important. So, anyway, any questions? I know we're going to hit that a little heavier a little later on, but I'm very much available to answer questions, or if you want my card, I'd be glad to try and help you if I can. So anyway, if you don't have any questions, that's all I had.
All right. And then I'm just gonna hit this briefly because Bliss McKnight will be up here and you can speak with them. But mediating a personnel policy problem. Document, just as he was just saying. Listen very carefully to whom is making the complaint and make this your best friend. Set it in the middle of the table and say, I'm going to record you. This is such and such on such and such a day and time, and in present, and name names. And because you can write a lot of notes, but still having a verbal recording to send to your attorneys is priceless. Follow your policies and procedures listed in your personnel handbook. Make sure that it tells, if they do this, we do this, and you can tell it straight out to the person that you're speaking with. Be as confidential as possible. You cannot go and say, so-and-so just came in my office today and you would not believe what they told me. You can't. People are going to come to you and they're going to say, so-and-so said he was in your office and you say he did this. I don't know. Sorry, I'm not allowed to speak to you about that. Contact legal, HR consultants. Prepare to take the steps to reconcile the problem. Lean on your strengths and map out the path that you're going to take to solve the problem. I did that through speaking with attorneys. And they gave me questions to ask and how to ask them. Be ready to change course at any time, because right in the middle of when you think you have about all done, someone else might show up with a complaint. Know when it's over your pay grade or your line of expertise. Back out when it is, okay? Because if this goes to court, you don't want to be the one that's holding the bag on something that should have maybe been investigated legally. Always complete your investigation until there is a resolution to the problem. The attorneys say don't ever leave anything open-ended. That's the worst thing that you can do. Solve it, get it down in writing, either verbal warnings, handwritten warnings, a fire, a termination, whatever is going to happen, make it all the way to the end. Keep your commissioners and those who hold the purse strings involved in what's going on with you. Don't be out there by yourself, because just like payroll, HR can be held responsible for the decisions that you make. So that's all I have for today. If you have any questions, I have my card up here. Also, get online and sign up for that, the chain that we have. I'm more than willing to help anyone, and thank you for coming.